In the previous video, I showed you guys how to solve a system of equations using matrices. In that one, we did a two-variable system of equations with x and y only, and in this one, I'm going to be moving it up to a 3x3 equation. And I want to make a note right here, you do not need to know how to find the inverse of a 3x3 matrix by hand. It's totally possible, but it's a little bit annoying. These 3x3 problems will either be calculator problems, which I'm covering in this video, or they're sort of an alternate style of problem, which I'll cover in the next video. It's a really, really neat style of problem. But for today, for this one here, I'm just looking at how we do this using the calculator. All right, so I've got two examples lined up for you. They're basically the same kind of problem. I just wanted to give you a chance to look at two of them. So here's my example. And very commonly these IB problems will be written like this. So part A will be write down the inverse of this matrix, right? And I want you to note, when they say write down, they mean write it down. In other words, when you see write down on the IB exam, you don't need to show any work. Like, they mean, hey, we know you're going to use this for a calculator to get this. Or, hey, we know this doesn't take much effort to do, so just write it down. Right? So how do we get the inverse of matrix on a calculator? In case you've forgotten that, I'm going to sort of cover that point now. Let me sort of put a matrix framework in here for myself. Okay, so how do we come up with the inverse of a matrix? Well, if you go over to your calculator, there's a matrix button that is right here above the inverse button, right? So if I hit second, and then that button, it brings up the matrix menu, right? If we go over to the edit menu, so we scroll sideways twice to edit, and then pick matrix A, we can go through and tell the calculator this will be a 3, enter 3, so a 3x3 matrix. And sure enough, this thing comes here and tells us, hey, great, put in all of your numbers. Right, so now we just need to take all of these numbers and place them into this matrix. So you've got 1, enter 2, enter -1, and we're going to go on like this: 3, 1, 1, and then 2, -1, 4. And with that, our matrix is put into the calculator. Something you should definitely do at this point is go back and check to make sure you put in all the numbers properly. It's really easy to make a mistake here, and you'll end up getting a lot of things wrong later on if you're not careful. So now that I've got that, I quit back to the home screen. Then from the home screen, I'm going to go back to the matrix menu. And this time I don't need to go over to edit because I don't need to edit another matrix. I just want to do something with A. So I'm going to hit enter, and that's going to paste A back to the home screen. Now what do we want to do with this thing? We basically want to find the inverse. We want to find A to the -1 power. So we just hit the -1 power button, which is conveniently the same button as matrix. And when you hit enter, it thinks for a second, comes back with, hey everybody, this is the inverse. Right? So when they ask you to write down the inverse of the matrix, great, I write down -0.5, 0.7, -0.3, 1, -0.6, 0.4, 0.5, -0.5, and 0.5. Right? That's the answer. That's all they're asking you. You're like, oh, how do I show my work? They know it's a calculator problem. They're not expecting you to know how to do this by hand, so they're just expecting you to find that thing and write it down. Okay? So yeah, you found the inverse of that matrix. Part B now says, hence, solve the following system of equations. And this is where your knowledge from yesterday should pick up. You should look at that and say, hey, I know how to write a matrix equation that represents that thing, right? So hopefully you remember that I can write down, oops, forgot my bracket. We can write down all of the coefficients in this matrix, right? So I can put 1, 2, -1, 3, 1, 1, 2, -1, 4. And then what comes after that? Like, what do you write down after the coefficient matrix? You guys should be writing down a little 3x1 matrix that is x, y, z. And this is supposed to be equal to sort of the answer matrix, as it were, like the -3, 2, 3. And so this is my matrix equation, right? So now how do I solve that thing? The way that I solve this is by applying the inverse to both sides, like putting the inverse here and putting the inverse over here. And I think I'm going to run out of space on here. Like I don't think I'm going to have room for it, so I'm going to sort of try and take some shortcuts. It basically means I'm going to have to put the inverse of my A matrix here. Oops, not negative A, -1. And the inverse of my A matrix on the other side. And that step that I wrote there, I don't think you need to really write down in your, like when you're doing the work for this, because we know what happens when I put the inverse of the thing here right next to this one. Those things should cancel one another out, right? It's putting the inverse here that sort of takes some work, right? And I think my question for you is, so what is the inverse of this matrix? And this is where hopefully you'll recognize, hey, that's the same matrix as the one we started with. Like if you look at this matrix here, that's the same thing that they asked you to find the inverse of. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this inverse that I just found, and in my case I can copy paste. I'm sorry that you can't do that. I'll paste it right here. And so now all I need to do is multiply this inverse matrix with this sort of 3x1 matrix. So please, again, don't feel like you need to do that by hand. What we can do is we can, bouncing back over to the calculator here, I can go back into the matrix menu, go over and edit a matrix. Oops, I didn't want to edit A, so quit back out. Matrix, go over to edit, scroll down to B. This time we want to do a 3x1 matrix. And this time I'll put all of my answer numbers in there. I'll put in -3 and 2 and 3. Okay, so now that's stored as my B matrix. So now, in order to solve this thing, what do I need to tell the calculator to do? I need to tell it to do A inverse, then go back to the matrix menu and pick B. And understand, this thing is going to tell the calculator to take the inverse of A, then multiply it by B, and that's exactly what I need. When I do that, I end up getting that my x value is 2, my y value is -3, and my z value is -1. And that is the solution to the system of equations. Right? So I know that took me a little while, but that's the procedure that we use. That's what we do. And I feel like the work that I've shown here is what would be expected of you. They're going to want to see a step where you write down the matrix equation. They're going to want a step where you write the inverse written down on the other side. Like, hey, I know how to move the inverse to the other side. And then your final step is, hey, look, I got the answers. Okay? If that makes perfect sense to you, great. I would say go on, start some of the homework problems. If you want one example for you to try on your own, I have another one written here that I'll go through. I will probably go into a little less detail on this one, but we've got another example if you want to do it. Okay? So I would definitely recommend you guys pause the video and do this one on your own if you've got a calculator. At this point, I'm going to assume that you've paused and done that, or you're just waiting to watch me do it again because it's that exciting. So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and go through and do this. So second matrix, we need to edit a matrix. I'm going to go down and use the C matrix just because I've got them. There's no sense erasing my previous work. So 3x3 matrix, I'll put these guys in. 1, 3, 2, 3, -5, 6, 2, 4, 5. Alright, so I've got that guy in there. Here's another interesting thought. While I'm in matrix editing mode, I'm going to go ahead and edit the D matrix as well. Like, you can sort of forecast ahead in this problem. You know that you're going to need to solve this system. You know that you're going to need these numbers here stored in another matrix. And it looks like somehow I got matrix J. I don't know. I guess I wasn't paying attention. Edit. D matrix. There we go. So like I said, while I'm in matrix editing mode, I'm just going to put in this other guy, -3, and the last one's 0, so I'll just leave that one as 0. Alright, so part 1 of this thing, write down the inverse of that matrix. Okay, so to do the inverse of that matrix, I need to do, so I need to come back to my calculator and do matrix C inverse. Okay, these are terrible numbers, right? They look bad, but the reality is they have to be nice somewhere. So something I wanted to show you guys about is in the math menu, there's a button that says convert to fraction. And if you hit enter on that, it will actually convert all of the numbers in that thing into fractions. And so we can come back here and reap the benefits of that and say, okay, well, this was 7/2, this was 1/2, this was -2, this was 3/14, this was -1/14, this one was 0, this was -11/7, this is -1/7, and this one is 1. And yay, I mean, that's the inverse. That's really tall because of all the fractions, but that's the inverse of that matrix. So yay, we got it. Moving on to the next section. Hence, solve the following system of equations. So the first step we can certainly take is we can certainly write this thing as a matrix system. Okay? So at the very least, in terms of showing work, I can write down that I know how to write this thing as a matrix equation. And I'll guarantee you, that's going to be worth some partial credit on the exam. Even if you totally boggled getting the right answer, you know, you can at least get a point for knowing how to write this down. Okay. Then in the next part, we're supposed to know how to, I want to move this onto the next page. We're supposed to know how to move the inverse over to the other side. So if you really want to show your work, I suppose the next step would be to write down, hey, I know that this is x, y, z equals the inverse matrix, which was this monstrosity up here. Paste this thing down here. And there's no point in having that yellow, so let me take that out. And then right next to that, I'm supposed to put my answer matrix. Okay. So the final step is actually solving that thing. Alright, so I'm going to do that by going back here and going back to matrix, picking my C matrix, doing the inverse of that, and then doing the D matrix, sort of our answer thing next to that. And it comes back with a really, really nice looking answer of x has to be -5, y has to be 0, oops, y has to be 0, and z has to be 2. Okay, that's how we solve 3x3 systems on the calculator. Really straightforward, really quick once you get the hang of it. These problems are usually going to be 6-mark problems, and I feel like if you get quick enough with the calculator, these problems should be doable in 2 to 3 minutes. This should be an easy 6 points and an easy way to rack up some time. So hopefully that made sense, and you guys will get a chance to start the homework soon.